People sometimes use the word privilege as an accusation that allows the accuser to feel better than the person they accuse of having privilege, and even to shame and discredit them. Someone tried to do this to me the other day in the YouTube comments, and it was some video where I talked about how desperate I was for help in my 20s and how I tried therapy but felt judged and felt unhelpable afterward and felt like giving up. And the commenter said, the fact that you could go to therapy in your 20s, it speaks volumes about the privilege you have. Now, when people try to hit me with that, I always get the urge to defend myself by trotting out proof that my life was all struggle and I deserve sympathy and I was deprived. But you know what? Even responding to comments like this and trying to prove how terrible my life was is not going to make that person get it. And in fact, it's just another way for me to play small. Have you ever felt this way? That urge to act like it's worse than anybody thinks so that they approve of you? Like that's some kind of badge of honor? This is my 4th video in the series I'm making on how I stopped playing small and how you can too. And if you love this topic, be sure that you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you get pinged the minute that new videos come out in the series. People are really liking this series and I'm loving making them. So I'll tell you flat out, if you grew up neglected and abused and you've struggled with relationships or addictions or depression or financial hardship, and the last thing you need is to avoid people or shun them or compare yourself to them either favorably or unfavorably because of, thinking your life is so hard and they have it all together. So I burst into tears the other day when I saw this reel posted by Dr. Nicole LaPera. Do you know her work? The holistic psychologist. She's so good on CPTSD. A lot of her stuff is on Instagram. And I feel like we're good friends. And you know how that is when you watch someone's content a lot and they get you and you just feel like you're close. But in fact, she's become an acquaintance of mine. And I think the world of her. I admire her work. And she endorsed my book. You can see her endorsement on the back. I'm very proud of that. I very much appreciate it, Nicole. And her reel the other day was about what she calls the ultimate privilege. And you know what it is? It's having a support system. Having a family who loves you and sticks by you and helps you through tough times with financial help and a place to stay when you need it, and who teaches you how to navigate life. That is what so many of us didn't have. I didn't. So I want to tell you about a time in my life when I was 21. This person who was like, you had therapy in your 20s. Yes, I was working my way through college. I was a home health aide and I worked at Straw Hat Pizza. And I worked very hard to get through college, and there was like kind of a health plan there. I had no money. I was living with a boyfriend at first, and then the whole relationship was melting down. It just turned out this guy was totally having an affair with someone who was like our roommate, and it had been going on for months, and this weird feeling that I had all the time. I'd be like, something's going on. No. You've probably been through this before. It was a long time ago, but boy, did it mess me up. And I held on to the relationship because I didn't have enough money to get my own place. But then it just got so bad that I had no choice. And I managed to couch surf for several months, at different people's houses. I was barely friends with them, wore out my welcome again and again. And I was depressed and scared and I was stressed out and my stomach was always in knots. I got so skinny. And in those days, I kind of wanted to be skinny, but not like this. I was like 114 pounds and I'm 5'6". I was too skinny. So yeah, I was working as a home healthcare assistant to these elderly people. And in a way, it was a good job. It was kind of hard. They were the woman especially was sort of verbally abusive all the time. But I had meals while I was there. There were these long shifts. Occasionally I'd stay overnight and I could do my homework, and I often got the use of their car to run errands. So it's like a really good gig in a way. And I managed to get like a small student loan, like $800, but enough to get a little apartment again. And I've never been so sad and lonely in my life. I was really having trouble like keeping up with school because I was so down. So I made an appointment and I saw the counselor at the school, and which was free, thank goodness, another generous thing. And I saw her a few times, and we talked about my mother, of course, and her drinking. This was right when the sort of consciousness about adult children of alcoholics was breaking out. And it was becoming a thing. And she was like, there's this book by Claudia Black, and I think it was called This Will Never Happen to Me. And I read it. It totally blew my mind. Like, I knew my mom was an alcoholic, and I knew that I was struggling, but I had never connected the two. But actually finding out about that, and especially the way it was all handled back then, it kind of pushed me a little further over the edge. But I was going to see this counselor, and I was talking to her, and she was being very sympathetic. And I told her not only about the drinking, but how, we had just been totally neglected. We were hungry. We didn't get health care. And I was abused by a family member when I was a kid. And I never told anyone. I also told this counselor how later, like in my teens, I had hung out with people who were doing drugs, and I went like too far into the drug doing thing to a dangerous degree. And I was able to stop. But the shame that I felt around that, and the way that I don't know, I just felt really stigmatized by my own behavior. And I felt really bad about myself. And I think I had always been playing small around who I chose to have in my life. I would sort of put up with a lot of crap. So I remember the counselor was surprised that I, manifested all this depression, but that I wasn't angry. I wasn't angry at my family. And she was kind of outraged on my behalf that my parents had not, my mom and my stepdad, that is, because by this time my real dad died. He died of ALS when I was 15. But they hadn't detected that I was doing drugs. They hadn't detected that I had been abused and was actually probably showing all the classic signs. I got very withdrawn, kind of lost my sense of humor and my sparkle, started being alone all the time. That's when I was a kid. So, they were very not tuned in to what was going on with the kids. They were pretty caught up in my mom's alcoholism and all the problems that was causing. And we were living on her teacher's salary, which is never enough under the best of circumstances. But my stepfather later told me after she had died that take-home pay was $1,100 a month. This was a while ago. And that $700 of that went to her alcohol and cigarettes. And so they would always try to borrow money from my grandparents or something, but we were poor. There was not enough to eat. There was not hot water. There weren't clothes. And so until I learned to babysit and make my own money, and then, I started some businesses, I just didn't have stuff. So I had a lot of shame about that. This counselor felt sad for me that I never felt I could tell my parents or ask for help. And I think she didn't understand that I really couldn't, and thought that I had somehow internalized something and mistakenly thought I couldn't tell my parents. But actually, even when I was a kid, I read the situation correctly. But the counselor told me that in order to heal, that I wouldn't be able to until I confronted my mom and stepdad about how this had happened and how they looked the other way and they didn't help me and protect me. And then the whole thing could be set right. And then my life would be different. And she thought they would be sorry and they would go, oh my gosh, that happened to you. We're so sorry. We love you so much. And it would be this big relief for me, and we'd connect again, and we could all go to family therapy or something. And honestly, my family could never have afforded therapy of any kind, even if they were normal supportive families that I think this counselor envisioned. Her whole reference for what her parents was from her experience. So I really could not imagine at that time a good outcome from telling them, but I took her advice. And when I went home, I really wanted to understand, why am I struggling so much? Why do I keep ending up with these jerks who don't care about me and cheat on me? And, why am I having such a hard time getting on my feet? And, she's like, well, it's because you haven't confronted your parents. You can guess where this is going. What actually ended up happening was I went home, I told them everything, and I was crying, and I told them I was angry that they hadn't helped me. And I don't know, maybe I came off as too angry or too intense, but then again, that's sort of a traumatized kid thing. I did something wrong by telling them in the manner I told them. And they actually got really angry. They were not sympathetic, and they threw me out of the house. And I had to go stay with a friend for a day or two. My friend had to go get my stuff. They didn't want me back in the house. And I called them a few times, but they said they didn't want to talk about it. So eventually I just had to fly home. And I hadn't even spent time with them except this one sit down. And everything was weird after that. I was eventually allowed back in the house, but I was treated like I was the problem. And we never discussed what had happened. And I knew what they did was terrible. I knew that. But I didn't really know. I didn't really get it. And you know how you can kind of internalize believing like, yeah, that was bad, but, didn't I kind of deserve that after all for some reason? But I learned recently that the same thing happened to another member of our family. I didn't know at the time. And when I found out, I felt so hurt for this other family member who had been thrown out just like I was. And for them, I felt the horror of it. I felt how unjust it was and just how, what ridiculous, shitty parenting that is to throw people out. And the other person in my family was a teenager. I was like 21 when they threw me out, and I told them. So the other person was underage. And then this caused me to feel it for myself, my younger self. And all these years later, 40 years later, it put me into a functional freeze, basically. And this was recently. And I just didn't know. I didn't know how bad it was. I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was this bad. It really hit me because I cared that this had happened to anybody else. Yeah, it's weird how you can do that sometimes. Think that you're exempt from it being terrible. Well, I'm tough. I can take it, but I wouldn't want this to happen to anybody else. So anyway, it really hit me hard. And it was one more layer of awareness that had come to the surface. And if you had a rough childhood, you know how that happens sometimes, that recovering from trauma comes in waves. It comes in waves of recognition, oh my God, this happened, and then grief, and then waves of resolution and peace. And sometimes it's sort of back and forth, generally going in a good direction if you have a good way of healing. And the reason healing is even possible is that I have a support system. People listen to me, and they come to my aid, and they go easy on me when I'm having a hard time. And I shared a little about the rough time that I was going through after this trip where I found out about what had happened in my family to other relatives. And, my relatives and I used to be totally estranged until my stepdad died, and a bunch of us came together and started talking. And we're making friends now. It's really positive in that way. And I learned things that had happened to them, and it helped me know that I was not alone, that my memory was real, that I wasn't misremembering this or anything. And I felt really understood. But yeah, I knew what happened to me was bad, but I didn't really get it until I heard about it happening to somebody else. So my friends, my husband, the Crappy Childhood Fairy membership community, all of these people were very kind and supportive of me and understanding because, yes, I was open to them, that I was not on the top of my game for a while. I was a little bit scattered. I was exhausted. You could see it on my face. There's some videos you'll see of me from the winter where I'm just trying to get the words out and looking quite pale. And I was exhausted. I was brain fogged, and those waves of that feeling of I don't know, what's the point of everything? That dark thought sort of kept hitting me, and they'd say, "We love you, Anna." And they didn't dismiss the severity of it. And I know not all of you have people like that in your life right now, and I didn't for most of my life. So I've been on the other side of this, and I'm just here to tell you, gosh, is it worth doing whatever you can to have that? And it's a step-by-step process. But it makes all the difference, when the bad memories hit, is that you have people, and it's almost like they hold your hands so that you don't fly away into the past, into the old bad feeling, into the old emotional flashback of something that you don't even have words for, that was so hard for you, that made you feel like there's no point. So when people who have been through trauma get together and are working together to heal, we don't even have to try to fix each other, and we don't have to explain or defend ourselves. We just understand, and we stay near to each other. We don't even go into detail about what happened. We can say the slightest thing, and we're like, I know what you're talking about, and I've been there. And in my membership community, we all use the daily practice techniques that you always hear me talk about. I talk about them because they're so helpful. And we use them to keep processing those thoughts and feelings and rinsing them off, sort of. It's almost like a shower that you take. And you get that residue off of just these memory feelings and memory thoughts, or anxious about the future. It can really get in the way. And when that's you got some space from that, you can get that new feeling okay, this doesn't really suck. There is a point, and I know what to do, and I'm walking through to the other side. And it does get better. It really does. This, my friends, just like Nicole LePera said, is the ultimate privilege, a support system. Now, most of us didn't have it during those crucial growing up years, and many of us still don't have it. But one of the best and most worthwhile things that you can do now is to find that support system, to be part of a support system for others as well. And I know it's not easy. It's hard to find your people. I've got a whole book coming out about this in October 2025, Connectability. If you're watching this video in the future, you can go buy it right now. You can actually pre-order it right now on Amazon. Anna Runkle, Connectability. It's right there next to the book that is out, Re-Regulated. And I know it's not easy. Trauma wounds can make it feel stressful and triggery to deal with people. Something goes wrong and all your good intentions is just, it just collapses sometimes. But this is where friends and tools for healing that you share with other people can help catch you like a safety net. It's too hard to figure everything out all by yourself with a troubled mind already, that in the moment sees no light at the end of the tunnel. Together, we can keep these dark times lit up for each other. We can find our way. So I first found that experience in 12-step programs for families of alcoholics, just having that place to go and permission to say what was really going on, and then have a common approach to healing and changing our lives. It was so transformative for me. And then when I learned that the core problem with me was less my mother's drinking, though it certainly affected me, but it was more my own complex PTSD symptoms, which I now understand as like a neurological injury from abuse and neglect when I was young that gives me some, stuff that I have. I need workarounds. I need a system. I need a way to re-regulate. I get very dysregulated. And once I understood that and, really had a program that was working for me on that with my daily practice, I created the Crappy Childhood Fairy and the community that we have here. And if you want to join us, you can be a member or you can just start with our free calls where we do the daily practice techniques together. And my team and I answer questions. It's an amazing group. And one thing we all seem to have to work on is not comparing ourselves to people who didn't have trauma in childhood. And, everybody's different. It's not like all the non-traumatized people are perfect and we're so messed up, as we know. But this is a huge way of playing small, comparing ourselves. Why am I so screwed up? Why do I keep having terrible relationships? Why can't I get a decent job or eat healthy or stay civil instead of lashing out when I feel upset? There's an answer to that. The trauma wounds make it difficult. And some people had the ultimate privilege. They had people to guide them and love them and believe in them and help them through life's rough patches, and their nervous systems function very nicely. And maybe there was childcare when they needed it and financial support. And when Nicole LePera said this, I burst into tears because of course that's important. I mean, how did I not give that the right amount of weight? And she said, don't compare yourself to people who had all that. Where you are in your life is already a great accomplishment. And I thought about this a lot, how I always did compare myself to people who had actual encouragement to get an education and approval for being who they were, and people who had parents who kept abusers away from the children, for God's sakes, people who had meals 3 times a day and a working shower and no attachment wounds to make every relationship into a life-wrecking disaster. Where I am now, where you are, is a miracle. And now we deserve to embrace every scrap of privilege available to us. We don't apologize for it. And we do that by connecting a little at a time and working on ourselves so that we can have a support system. If you want to connect with this community, I invite you to subscribe to this channel, by the way, and then dip your toe in to taking my free course, The Daily Practice. Once you register, we'll let you know about the weekly Zoom calls that we offer. They're free too. Anyone can come to those and do the techniques and ask questions. So now you have a place to go. You can access that free course right here, and I will see you very soon.